Alright, well this is Aaron Squire coming to you guys again. No guest this week on episode 81, so people are a little bit busy. We're building up to that Halloween holiday, which a lot of people like to get into the spirit of things by dressing up or whatever. I myself am slated to do some spinning of the records, as some call it. I'm actually pretty excited. I picked up some lights, some DJ lights for my setup. I do a little bit of DJing. I'm not crazy good, but I do some of that on my side, you know, outside of my job. Today, though, we're going to talk about some great stuff. We've got the YouTube winner. We're gonna talk about that first, and then we're gonna talk about the person that's going to be the very first person to go for the 100,000 Hex Championship at the headquarters. And we've got a couple of deck lists to look at. We've got a Fog combo by John Tatta, who used to be the Hex TCG Pro main guy, who's kind of like stepped back from that, and you know, Hex TCG Pro is kind of defunct these days. And then we're going to do a sealed deck build because tomorrow we've got the tournament. So let's just jump right in and get that giveaway done for all of those YouTube peeps. Remember, you should be doing some YouTubes. If you know, post on my YouTube, tell me what you think about the episode, tell me what you think, you know, answer my questions, and yeah, I'd love to hear back from you. Any feedback you can give me would be much appreciated. So let's head over to the show screen here. Not too much else to do. Let's see who we've got that can actually win one of these. So I've got my dice, my handy dandy six-sided dice. Now it's been one the last couple of weeks. I am moving it around quite a bit here, so let's see if we can get something that's not a one. Last time it's been Ravenhawk like the last couple. It looks like it's number 4 this time. So we go Ravenhawk, Hernan, Pablo, and then Zimic, and then Silmeagle. So Silmeagle is going to get a convocation pack. I'm going to go ahead and open that up right at the very beginning of the show so all my YouTube people can make sure that they know what to do next time. Now, for next week, I am starting to run out of convocation packs, so if you like to try the convocation pack, I need you to tell me convocation pack. But if you want to try to get the 3 packs of cards for a draft, say that you want the draft. Also, again, I would love to get actual feedback from people. It's nice that you love the show and stuff, and I appreciate that. Let's see what we got. You guys get to see it first, and it's going to be Cloud King sleeves. So I'm going to need to scratch that up, and then I'm going to send Smeagol an in-game message with that. Cloud King sleeves. That's a pretty sweet prize right there. I like my Cloud King sleeves a lot. So pretty awesome prize. But let's get on with the news so we can close out that window. The winner of the very first, our first of 12 people that's going to be going to the Hex TCG headquarters for that $100,000 tournament, apparently it's a $40,000 prize for first place, is InfamousNeo. InfamousNeo, it couldn't have happened to a better person in my opinion. He really deserved what he got. They've got a nice profile on him over here where they ask him a couple of questions. He seems to be getting a little bit more beardy lately. He's kind of bearded out, so I guess that's a new thing for Neo, but always a great person to watch. He's got a lot of viewers. If you haven't started watching him, he's one of the people that's streaming the most. He's also one of the main Hex CCG streamers on the main channel, so couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. I'm really happy for him. So yeah, congratulations InfamousNeo from Deck Build with the Squire to you. I hope you do very well in the upcoming tournament, and yeah, congratulations. Moving on, we've got the other, I mean, I guess they're just talking about the next Hex Invitational. We're going to talk about that in a couple minutes, but let's look at some of these preview cards. So we've got Bloodlust, which is, these are all PvE cards, so you can only get them for PvE type stuff, but it's a 3-cost constant in Ruby, just a single Ruby threshold. It says orcs you control have speed. It's alright, but I think I would rather play the orc that just gives orc speed if you pay one. I believe there's a 2/2 orc out there that gives orc speed, and he costs 3. Now, it's, you know, maybe a little bit slower. This is, you don't have to pay those extra resources, but honestly, like that, I'd rather have the body, even though he's a little bit removable, than the Bloodlust, because the Bloodlust could be I mean, if you top deck this and your board is clear, or if you're at a stalemate, it's not really going to help you do more damage most of the time. It just feels like most of the stuff in Ruby already has speed, and if I need to give more orcs speed, then I'm just going to use the orc that actually gives them speed by paying 1. or I could even use that other orc where you can pay 1 to shift the speed over. Like, even that seems better than this. Like, as far as like a deck building standpoint, I don't really see this being very well played, but I could be wrong. The analysis of it, though, is true that in the late game you do need to get that extra damage in. And in fact, this morning I was playing a fog-ish deck, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, and the orc player beat me exactly at 0, and if he hadn't, then I probably could have comboed him out the next turn. So do keep that in mind as well. Moving on, we've got the Fire Gut Zombie. Now this guy is a 3-cost, 1 ruby threshold, 3/2, 3 strength and 2 toughness. And it says he's an undead zombie, and it says he's ruby, so when he enters play, it deals damage equal to its power to another random troop. So it's not fighting it, so you won't actually get this guy. He won't actually die. It is PvE, so you know it's a very super powerful card. For 3 cost, it's basically a 3-point basic action speed removal card, especially if you know you need to kill something that is out there with a 3 toughness back ends, but there's something else in the way, and you happen to have the burn spell. You can burn that other card and then play this guy and guarantee that you're going to kill the card with the 3 back ends. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can work things out like that. This is a card that may have gotten some flack in other games like Hearthstone, where it is that a lot of things are random, where it's like it deals damage to something randomly. It's like, well, yeah, that people don't like that, but it does make you play tactically, as in, you know, you can control that randomness. Like, if you feel like you need to be able to deal with a certain thing on the board, you can play this guy first and then maybe deal the extra damage with your ruby spells, or you could kill something to make it a better chance that you'll hit what you want to hit with it. So, you know, there's plenty of tactics with this guy. It's going to be amazing staple card for a lot of ruby decks in PvE. I really think so. We'll probably see a lot of the enemies have it as well. October VIP weekend is coming up next weekend, so make sure to get out for this. It looks like, let's see, tournaments, going to be in-game store. What is it saying? Is constructed. So it's going to be constructed next weekend. So put your best constructed deck together, or if constructed is a little bit daunting for you, I think you can hold on to your tickets and just wait till next month, and maybe you'll do a sealed or a draft or something like that. I think that it's sealed. Basically, it goes between constructed and sealed, as I understand it. Like, there's no actual drafting right now for VIP, but yeah, there you go. So have another chance of getting your Quash Ridge Tusker and your Exarch of the Egg alternate images. I love the Quash Ridge Tusker alternate art. Both cards very playable. Obviously, more people are going to want the Tusker. It's going to have a little bit higher value because he's seeing a lot more play right now, but Exarch of the Egg is also pretty good. And yep, more of the information, how it's going to work. Shards of Fate Beta Cup Series, the one-on-one esports tournament, which is basically if you go to ESL Gaming, you can do your one-on-ones anytime, and you can win up to 650 euros or 100 euros is what I believe it's saying there. But you could also do the North American side and win $100 or $250 or $650, or you know, or well, I guess they're giving a prize pool of $650, but people are taking home $100 per month, and they are very fast to pay these out, so it's definitely worth it. There's so many tournaments going on that you should be able to find one that you can play where you won't feel too daunted about. And you know, even if you can't spend a lot of money in the game, you can still get out and play some of the free tournaments. We've got this tournament series, we've got the 5 Shards Cup series, and of course we've got the $100,000 tournament, and that one of course is a little bit more expensive for people. So I think that it's good actually that our tournament season is going this way, because the ESL series is going to be a lot more, as I see it, for players that don't have a lot of money and a lot of time, because it's good. It gets you some cards and that sort of thing just by playing it. It's an easy way to get into the game, and you know, if you win a couple games, great. If you don't, then a lot of them are single eliminations, so you can get out of them really quickly. But for people that want to spend the money and get more prestige and honor, you can try to play in the Invitational and try to get, you know, basically to be one of the 12, just like InfamousNeo. So you have those two options. Depends on what you're basically going for, how much time you have, and that sort of thing. But I think it's just a great thing to have those options open to everyone. If you think that there's not a lot going on, I mean, there's a lot going on right now in Hex. So make sure to get out there and check out those tournaments. Also, make sure to check out the profile. InfamousNeo, if you get out to a lot of the, or not a lot of the, but basically sometimes they did a Hex raid last year, but we also, pretty much every year he's been at Gen Con, I believe, and so you can get out there and see him there. He's a real nice guy. I encourage you to meet him. Next, we've got the Hex. Speaking of the Hex Invitational, the next round is going to be tomorrow, and you need 10 tickets to play in this. October 17th sealed, and for people that needed to know what time it is, I went ahead and figured it out, at least in Central Time. So it's going to be 5 p.m. It's 5 p.m. in the Central European Standard Time, which translates to 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, which would mean that in West Coast time, I believe it's -1 hour, so it's -2 hours, so it's like 8 a.m. On the West Coast, and then I believe that means it's like noon on the East Coast or something like that. I think that's how it works out, but if not, of course, you can correct me in the comments on our YouTube video. I'm sure there are a lot of people that are actually practicing for this tournament right now, and that's probably why there aren't a lot of people watching this show. But that's fine. The giveaways are going to stay. As long as I have at least one person, hey, that's an easy giveaway to get, right? Rules and terms of service, don't really need to know too much about that. I mean, basically, play well and make sure it is that you're doing things on the up and up. Moving on, we've got the sealed deck primer, which was written by Jason Zilla, who's one of the development team at Hex Entertainment, and he just kind of goes through exactly kind of what we're going to talk about tonight, where it's a lot of the similar things that you look at when you're drafting. However, your pool does have a lot to do with what you're going to choose. You want to choose your most powerful shards. It's very difficult to play a mono shard in sealed, and so you have to pick your best two when you're looking at them. And so that's kind of what he, for the most part, is looking at. And he also gives you some other tips, like a lot of the 2, 3, 4, 5s are going to be pretty good cards. You're going to probably want a lot of things in the 2, 3 range. Or maybe you could play a faster deck. He also talks about your curve and how you want to have 17 resources, or maybe 18, or maybe 16. I don't think he's mentioned 16, but you know, you want to have a good curve out and that sort of thing, and then look at some of your bombs, things that just dominate the game, like your Vampire Princess, Indigo Dreamwalker, Hatchery Cultivator, some of the ones he points out. He takes a pool, he looks at what he has, he figures out what are the most powerful ones, and then he puts together a sealed deck out of that, and that's his example of a sealed deck, which is what we're going to do tonight. So that's pretty much all I have to say about the news this week. If you had something that I missed, I would love it if you posted some comments or let me know about that, and I can cover it next week, or we can talk about it some more. If there's ever anything is that you want me to talk about on the show, let me know, and we'll get to that next week. So let's move over to the decks. So this deck was not mine. This is one that I looked up, and I actually tried to find it so that way I could point it out to you. But this was John Tatta, who used to be, again, Hex TCG Pro, in charge of them, running that provider of Hex content. He built this deck, and I can't remember if I think he did it in the sealed or in the constructed Gauntlet queue is the one he used for this one. So it's really pretty interesting. It's running Winter Moon. So with Winter Moon, she, I guess, has the ability to take 2 target cards from your graveyard, or 1 if you only have 1, and then you take those cards and you shuffle them back in your deck. So you're getting more spells back into your deck, basically more troops or more cards that are spells, that sort of thing. Those cards get, when you play this card, draw a card. So on top of that, they can trip you. They basically draw you an extra card every time you play them the next time, which is pretty sweet, because in the late game, a lot of times you'll have issues where it is that you'll flood pretty hard. And even playing this deck, I did have some times when I flooded pretty hard, but it does a lot of things to try to get around that and be very consistent. We do look at the curve here, and he does have a lot of 2-drops and no 3-drops whatsoever. He's basically trying to ramp into some of these 4, 5, 6, 7, and it's fine because he only has, what is that, 12, 13, 14 cards in the 4 through 7 range. And for the most part, like, you're going to want to play these, but you also a lot of times want to have 6 resources in play when you have a 4-drop in hand, so that way you can still play some of these 2-drops that are also going to be in your hand. So the basic idea here is that he's going to use cards like Lullaby, where it is that you revert all of the attacking troops and then prevent all the combat damage. He's going to play those during your opponent's combat phase, so they miss their whole turn. He's going to play cards like Time Ripple to bounce your opponent's troops on the attack and put them back into their hand. He's going to play those types of things to kind of stall the game out until he can set up for Mastery of Time, and basically Incantation of Ascendance is a nice closer for this deck. It's one of the things that you can do to close out the games with this deck. It also runs Chimes of the Zodiac to play a lot of the cards twice. Archmage Wrenlocke is going to go ahead and draw you cards every time you play those cards, which you're shuffling in your deck. So you're basically drawing lots of cards, playing lots of cards, burning through your deck, and then putting those cards back into your deck, kind of like a deck builder style again, something that Cryptozoic seems to favor a lot. Another card that's kind of interesting in here is Scheme, and I believe that the reason why this is in here is mostly it's to copy Mastery of Time, but then also when you're shuffling other cards in, it's to make copies of those ones that are going to draw you extra cards. So you can make copies of, for instance, we could make copies of Lullaby. If we've shuffled one of these in, we can make a copy of it, so now we have multiple copies of Lullaby that draw us extra cards. Not only that, we could actually shuffle the Scheme in. I found Scheme to be one where I didn't really want 2 of it. I would much prefer to have just 1 Scheme in the deck. The other thing is, it almost feels like maybe I shouldn't be targeting Mastery of Time, because Mastery of Time is never going to, you're never going to be able to target it with Wintermoon. So, you know, there's a lot of interesting things that can happen in this deck, and you can play turns where it is that all of a sudden your opponent, you're at 4 life, your opponent turns the turn over to you, and suddenly you start drawing cards, playing Mastery of Time, and you throw an Incantation of Ascendance on the table, then you draw a bunch of cards, and you have a 20/20 going into your opponent's face. Or if you play 2 Incantation of Ascendance, you'll end up with like 2 16/16s coming into play. Incantation of Ascendance, of course, is the one where it's going to transform all of them as long as you have one of them transformed, and they turn into a Lightning Armada. Lightning Armada says it gets +2/+2 power and toughness, and it has flight, and it has that +2/+2 for each card in your hand. So if you have 7 cards in hand, I mean, it's a 16/16. You could have more than that because you do have to discard down to 7 at the end of your turn, but until that time you don't. So I've had it up to 20/20. Just swing through with it, and because you're attacking with it probably the turn after you've played it, it doesn't have to worry about summoning. Well, we don't really call it summoning sickness, but basically it can go the turn that it comes into play because it's being transformed. So it can come through and do some damage really quickly. Other cards that can also win the game just with your Mastery of Times and whatnot is your Augur of Sirion and your Indigo Dreamwalker. Once in a while, those cards will also win you games because you just take so many turns that your opponent doesn't get to play the game anymore. They just sit there and watch you play. So, kind of an interesting take on things. I actually flipped some things around for my version. I felt like it did a little bit better for me, and we're going to look at some of the options that I looked at for the deck, and some things are going to take the deck in a completely different situation, completely different direction. So first card, let's look at the amount of removal or things that help us stall the game out that we have in the deck to begin with. We've only got 3 Time Ripple, and then 4 Lullaby. That's pretty much it. And then you have, of course, your troops that can defend for you. So we can go ahead and count those 2. Let's see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 troops. So 5 plus, so that's 11, 12, 13, 14. We've got 14 cards that could stall the game out a little bit for us if we play them. But the troops are the most removable cards in the game. So we do have to keep that in mind when we're talking about the troops. a lot of times, especially if you're playing against blood, they'll just remove your troops. So one of the cards I thought about maybe putting in here is like 1 or 2 Yesterday. Yesterday is really going to set your opponent behind by just throwing tons of cards in their hand, and then they can only play some of them or most of them or whatever, and then they all have to be exhausted again. It just really just, I mean, just like the card looks like, it just turns back the clock, and then you can just shuffle it back into your deck again. So maybe 2 of these, maybe main deck, would be something to think about, at least if you're going to play this action-oriented version of the deck. There's also another version that I saw in some of the other things that I thought was pretty interesting. Another thing is counter magic. So we've got Verdict of the Ancient Kings, and then down here, of course, I've got counter magic, and then I also put, where's the other one? Suffocate. So all these are options when we're talking about cards we could use to counter our opponent's strategies, maybe as a 1 of or a 2 of. They are removable. If we're going to bounce things anyways with Yesterday, I mean, that seems pretty nice. A nice way to combo things is, you know, you have Yesterday, if you have 8 resources, which seems like a lot, but when you're taking lots of turns and stalling, you know, every time you stall a turn, it lets you most of the time ramp a turn. So that seems like something that should be in this deck. At least counter magic, at least maybe 2 counter magic. You know, I could be wrong about that. Maybe there's a reason why. I also like Suffocate maybe as a 1 of, because every time you play it, you shuffle it back into your deck, and then your opponent now has Spiderling Eggs in their deck, and that could give you more blockers or more things that maybe could push through damage if you need to later on. I actually think that Spiderling Eggs might work pretty well in this type of a deck. Next one I've got on here is Wrathwood Larch. I actually tried this as a 1 of, so I like this card because the big thing when we're playing Wintermoon is we want to have cards in our graveyard to shuffle back into our deck, so that way when we play them we draw cards. This is a nice card because we won't want to play it immediately. We can play it in our opponent's end step, get that Wild Shard, put it into our hand, and we don't have to worry about having Wild. If we look at the way that John had this set up, he's got 6 Wild Shards in the deck, and then Shard of Instinct. So he's got 10 wild sources, and he's really only needs 1 wild source in play. He's basically got the Chlorophyllias in here just to thin out the deck, and I'm not even sure if those are really that necessary for this type of a stall tactic type of a deck. I feel like the stall should be enough, but I understand that he kind of wants to combo out and get his Chimes online or his Augur of Sirion or, you know, a quick Archmage Wrenlocke or that sort of thing. And even then, shuffling in those Chlorophyllias because they're going to draw you a card the next time you play them, or they'll draw you a card if you have Archmage Wrenlocke, isn't the worst, but eventually they're not going to hit anything because you only have 6 Wild Shards in your deck. So not horrible, but I do like the Larch. Even though it isn't as fast, because I don't have to worry about threshold on it. If I wanted to, maybe I could push more into like more complete mono Sapphire, and I just have the Wild to activate the Wintermoon ability, and then I just play like 4 Larch in the deck, you know, because I can discard these, get my Wild Shards, and then I basically play all Sapphire Shards except for Shard of Instinct, and you know, that way later on maybe I can play my Larches, but for the most part at the beginning of the game, you know, I feel like that's pretty sweet to be able to do something like that. But then we're pushing more towards a deck that wants to maybe play more troops. Speaking of troops, some of the cards I've tried in decks like this are Thunderfield Seer. So enters play, the next action in your deck gets draw a card, so it's going to buff that card, which is pretty cool because then we can shuffle it back in the deck. He does a decent amount of blocking for a lot of the really fast decks that we're seeing out there, but he also gets killed by basically every Ruby spell that's out there. So I think that if I was going to play a card that was going to be that low-end troop that to block with, this one would be it over the Thunderfield Elder. Now, Thunderfield Elder is another one I've talked about at length in the past, where he does a lot of really cool stuff for the deck that you're going to be playing, where he's going to double those actions, but it feels really bad with counter magic. So if you're going to play counter magic, this is a definite like clunky card for the deck. I wouldn't like to play it, but for the deck that we have now, it should be fine because it's going to double those actions and help you extend and get more out of the deck. Although it doesn't really do too much to double, like Lullaby doesn't do very much. Doubling Chlorophyllia is okay. Double Arcane Focus is of course really good. Double Time Ripple is pretty good. Double Scheme, it's not bad. Double Mastery of Time would be amazing. You know, a lot of the things you could double in this deck seems like he takes advantage of that stuff. Plus, we're missing cards in our 3-point range anyways, so that's another option for the deck that we could look at seriously. This is a card, Succulent Cluckedon, the next one, another troop card. I went with a 1-of in my deck, and I really felt like a lot of the Ruby decks were just pushing damage so fast that this card was kind of a must, at least a 1-of, maybe even like a 2 or 3-of in the deck, just because he's going to give you that life you need to survive for a little while, and he's going to kill those 1/1s, and it just feels like he's an amazing card for the deck. Plus, you shuffle, he gets killed, you shuffle him back in, and now you have more life gain in the deck. Life gain was something that John's version didn't have a lot of, so I felt like playing 1-of this guy was actually a pretty nice little techie card to play in here. Next, we've got the Storm Call, and this kind of does the same thing that your Yesterday does, and the same thing that your Lullaby does. So if you wanted to play like more heavy fog effects, then those cards would be for you. So the Storm Call plus the Yesterday, and then you just basically start shuffling them into your deck, and then finally maybe get your ultimates off with either a Archmage Wrenlocke with Incantation of Ascendance, or Dreamwalker, or Augur of Sirion, or whatever. Again, the nice thing about this deck is even if someone murders your cards, you just shuffle them back in the deck and they're still there. The threats are still there, unless it is that they can place them out of play somehow, which isn't a big thing right now, and this deck isn't seeing a ton of play, so the power level of this deck is probably a tier 2-ish kind of a deck, more of a fun combo-y deck to play. Another one I like to play in here was Sight of the Sun. Now, Sight of the Sun is another combo-y kind of card. It's kind of like an add-on, because you can play him and then play your Mastery of Time. So one of the biggest problems with Mastery of Time is, like, I play it, but I still have other cards in my hand that I want to play. I'm getting the extra turn. I'm really only typically ramping a card and then drawing a card. So it basically all it does is ramp me a card and draw me a card. But when you play Mastery of Time, let's say we have 5 resources in play, and we have Sight of the Sun in play, we get to gain 5 life, and again, we talked about how the life gain is kind of a big deal in this deck, and we get to still play the cards in our hand, which is pretty awesome. We've seen, I believe it was Hexed Havoc, use that, Sight of the Sun very heavily with Mastery of Time in the past, and so that seems like a pretty good card to have in there. We're going to skip over the Savage Lord for now, and we'll come back to that a little later when we start talking about some more dinosaurs. Next, we've got Reese the Crustcrawler. Now, this has been a mainstay in a lot of decks lately, especially ones that are running Master of Time. It seems like it's like an auto-include. If you're playing Sapphire, it's like you might as well just throw a Reese in there, because a lot of times he just wins games for you. He's almost like back in the day when I used to play Magic, he's almost like the Jace the Mind Sculptor of Sapphire right now. It's like, just by himself, he just sits on the board and he's like, you will answer me, or you're going to lose in 3 to 4 turns, or maybe you'll lose next turn because I just happen to have this craziness that I'm going to put on the board. If I was playing Reese, I would definitely want to play some counter magic to defend him a little bit. I'd probably play between 2 and 3 of them. The deck would probably go in a little bit of a different direction, but again, it's another great one we can shuffle in if we need to. Even a 1-of seems like it would be an okay thing if you wanted to stay with the more action route on your deck and more combo-y action route. Next one on here, these 2 cards, Mesmerize and Incubation Webs. So first we've got Mesmerize. Now this is a card from the set 1 that saw a lot of play, then it didn't see very much play, and then it basically hardly ever sees play now at all. But in this action-heavy deck, I actually think I like it a lot. This basically says the troop can't ready during its controller's ready step. It only costs 3 for removal, so it's the same cost as Murder. It does somewhat the same job, like the troop's still on the table, so if the troop has an activated ability that it does not need to exhaust for, it really doesn't stop that troop's ability, and then they're still on the board for any other things, that checks that need to be made on it. But for all intents and purposes, that troop is out of action. And this would have saved me this morning when I was playing this deck, because I played against a blood, I think it was a mono blood deck, and turn 3 he drops Fentio. And Fentio, I'm trying to draw lots of cards, and Fentio's throwing, of course, 5/5 spiders in my deck that kill my troops, which doesn't really matter that much because I don't have that many troops. But yeah, if I had Mesmerized Fentio, that would have been the best thing that could have happened to me in that match, and I would have probably been much better off in that matchup. But didn't have it in the deck at all. So this is another card that probably needs to fit into that 3-point range. I actually like it a lot better than the Time Ripple. Now Time Ripple is great because it's so fast, but it doesn't permanently get rid of things. Like, it would not get rid of that Fentio. It would just delay him like 2 turns. And I understand there's a chance that you may only need those 2 turns to go off and then go crazy, drawing lots of cards and playing lots of turns and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's one that I would look at. Another one is Incubation Webs. Now the problem with this one says, it says exhaust target opposing troop. It gets, at the start of its turn, exhaust this, then creates spiderling eggs and put them into your opponent's deck. So I like this card because if we can just stall long enough, eventually our spiders should just take over the game. So this card by itself could win you the game, but your opponent's troop gets to exhaust or unexhaust at the beginning of the turn, which is a huge problem when we're talking about Fentio, because in response to this card exhausting Fentio, he can exhaust himself and still put those spiders in your deck. So if you decide to play with Incubation Webs and your opponent's playing with a Fentio, it's not going to work if your opponent's smart. They'll get to exhaust them and still put spiders in your deck, so do be aware of that. Still does almost the same job as Mesmerize, so maybe a 1 or a 2 of. Plus it's a basic action, so we can throw multiple of these back into our deck, draw cards every time we draw them. Seems like a great removal card for a deck like this. Both Mesmerize and Incubation Webs, I think, are cards that should be seeing play if you're going to try out a deck like this. Next we've got the Howling Brave. Now this is probably more for if you're going to go the wild route, so there's a completely different deck type we're going to talk about now that we're looking. And so we looked at basically the action heavy version of this deck. Now I saw another deck, and I apologize because this is not, again, my completely original idea, but it basically runs the same stuff, except it runs about 2 counter magic, and then it runs most all the dinosaurs that fight things. So it runs your Carnosaurus, your Crocosaur, and of course it runs your Succulent Cluckodon. Another card you could run in here as a 1-of is your Savage Lord, because you could use that to, like, you're drawing extra cards anyways, and then it says at the start of your turn, this guy's going to actually draw those extra cards. If the top card's a dinosaur, just put it into play. Then you put it into play and you basically draw a card, which seems pretty amazing. Seems pretty combo-tastic to have, you know, your Savage Lord in there, and it's not a bad thing to even run like 4 of him. We don't have to worry about, you know, if we draw like 2 or 3 of these in our opening hand, if we can ramp into them, we can play them, no problems. Whereas if we draw like 2 or 3 Archmage Wrenlocke, yeah, it's okay, but it's going to feel kind of bad because they're unique, and if we need more blockers, that might be a problem. But we really have Archmage mostly in there for his ability, not much of anything else. Crash the Beast is another great action. I think that if you're going to play the action-heavy version of this, you might as well play at least 1 Crash the Beast. 1 is probably just fine in this deck. Again, you're going to shuffle it in, so you aren't... The problem with Crash the Beast is it doesn't feel great because it doesn't get the value of Winter Moon, so you'll never be able to... With Winter Moon, at least, you'll never be able to throw the draw a card on Crash the Beast. Instead, you're going to have to hope and pray that if you play Thunderfield Seer, that it just happens to hit your Crash the Beast and let you draw an extra card with them. Buccaneer, another classic removal card. Now, this is a body on top of removal, which I think is great because, again, if we shuffle this guy back into our deck and then he draws a card on top of that, I mean, it's just more removal. I've always liked Buccaneer much more than I've liked playing with Time Ripple. Time Ripple does have a different effect because it can put permanents in your opponent's hand, so it can hit those artifacts and it can hit those constants and that sort of thing. So maybe 1 Time Ripple is fine, especially if you're playing some sort of counter magic in your deck. That's going to help you out a lot. But I do actually like the creature-heavy version of this deck as well. Another one we've seen run in the past in a deck similar to this was an Arborean Rootfather, and basically they ran the card on him where it milled your opponent for like 8, which I guess is okay, and that was his win condition. He would mill your opponent out for 8, and then he would do something with Arborean Rootfather, like bounce him and then mill him again, and just keep milling, and then every time his opponent tried to attack, he would fog them, making it so that they didn't deal any damage. Right, and if someone counters your crash, you just put it right back in your deck. And that goes for every card in here. If someone counters your card, if it doesn't place that out of play, basically you're like, okay, I guess I'll just shuffle this back into my deck, and then if I draw it, and I get to play it again, then I draw more cards with it. So it feels very much like you have to have just the right amount of things going to your graveyard, enough actions to be good, but at the same time, you kind of like, if you're going to play the creature version, yeah, you're going to want to have your Crocosaurs, your Carnosaurus, your Root Fathers, maybe at least one Root Father, Savage Lord, that sort of thing. Howling Brave is another one you could put in here, and maybe you play a little bit more Coyotls. If you play at least 10 Coyotls in here, you could play the Plains Bluegrass, which could give you a little bit more fixing. That's probably around where I would be, but there's plenty of Coyotls you could play in here, and there's some other ones we've talked about before, like the 4/6. I forget his name right off the top of my head, but that's a pretty good choice you could go with. So that was basically John Tatta's deck. I'm going to post this in the comments for people that are at YouTube if you're looking for it. It'll be down below. His is very, very focused on getting the actions off and getting this combo into Incantation of Ascendance. So, you know, it does do that, but sometimes, especially like any deck, if it floods, then that's a big issue, and there's not enough defenses, in my opinion. Like, the troops are like defenses, but again, they're really not. How is it against the spider deck? We just talked about that. So the spider deck basically ate me alive this morning, and the best card I could figure out to play in this deck to deal with it is any card that fights the spiders or Mesmerize. And I think that Mesmerize is kind of a big player that needs to be played in this deck, as like probably between a 2 and a 4 of. I would probably play at least 3, honestly. But it feels like that's the card that really needs to be in this deck, because we can shuffle it back in. It's removal. It's soft removal. It's not going to, you know, impact everything that we need it to, but it does a really good job of dealing with anything that exhausts, which is most of the spider stuff. So I feel like this is really good deck tech, and it deals with some of the other quash stuff that we may need to deal with as well. So we can like exhaust a quash, and then he's basically useless for the rest of the game, for instance. So yeah, the kill power of the deck is really very low right now, and I feel like bouncing things is okay, but the chances of you not comboing are much higher than comboing in this deck. So the Ascend card, if it gets counters when you draw a spider, I think so. I think Ascension does. Incantation of Ascendance, it says when you draw a card, add an incant. So yes, it would. So it's on every card draw. But honestly, like if you're going Incantation of Ascendance, you probably have like 9 resources because you've done that, and or you have at least 6. You probably have this plus Lullaby in hand, hopefully, or at least you have this, and hopefully you won't die the next turn, so that way you can like Mastery of Time, or just draw a ton of cards off of like Archmage Wrenlocke or something like that. So pretty interesting deck. Again, John Tatta came up with this one. Can't take credit for that one, but we need to move on to the draft. We got about 23 minutes to put together not a draft, but a sealed deck. So that's what we're really here for, because again, we've got the tournament tomorrow, so we need to be ready for this. So we're going to take a look at a sealed pool here. So looks like I've got my decks, and I say episode 81 sealed pool. So let's look at what we've got to begin with. Picked cards. Of course, let's turn off all the champions for now. So we're going to say all types and then turn off champions, so we don't have to see those. So we've right off the bat we've got one. Let's just look at each shard first. That's I feel like a good way to do things. So we've got Warlord of a Tier, sacrifice another troops, okay. Valfang Emorite's a pretty good blocker. Vicious Visitaker is okay. Touch of Xenotoph. I actually misread this. It says target troop you control gets unblockable, and when it does, and then it says this turn at the very end. And I thought that this turn was a separate thing, so it doesn't permanently get unblockable. So Touch of Xenotoph got a lot worse for me. We got a Merciless Colors, okay. We got 2 of those. That's pretty decent removal. Paraphagy is pretty good removal. Rotcast is pretty good removal. So most of what we have is removal, and then we've got a Devouring Doomsphere. 3 blood. While this is in your hand, sacrifice 3 troops. Play it for free. Play this for free. Yeah, seems pretty bad. Has rage 1 for each troop in your graveyard. Yeah, I just don't see this happening. for us, especially because we don't have access to anything but the set 3 champions, and there's really nothing that efficiently puts tokens into play, and we don't, yeah, there's really just not enough tokens to play that guy. So that's not really a bomb that we can see ourselves playing. Emperor's Lackey is okay too. So I'm not too enthused with our blood pool right now, honestly. Like, our best cards are Rotcast, Periphagy, and Merciless Color. Like, those are the best cards we've got here. Shadowblade Assassin's okay, and the Vilefang Emorite's okay, but I'm not really seeing, and Broodguard's an okay finisher. Oh, and then Hatchery Priest. Okay, so Hatchery Priest makes it much better because we can put those spiders into our opponent's deck. So maybe we've got some play in blood. So let's look at the next shard. Let's look at Diamond. We're going to make a decision on one of these shards. So Diamond, of course, sees a lot of play with Ruby. It also sees a little bit of play with Sapphire. Starshields, yeah. We've got 2 Spirit-bound Spies, which kind of makes us want to play Spirits with Blood. Diamond Spirits. Spirit Eagle is pretty good. We've got 2 of those. Pretty good. Smoke Signals is an okay, like, one of removal card. Shard Call is an okay one of if we want to fix a little bit. Invigorating Breeze. +2/+2. This turn is a decent trick as well. Aetherlize is decent as either removal, or we can turn our own troop into a phantom. Ghost Feather is pretty awesome. Really liking our diamond pool right now. Deep Gaze Alkalites, pretty awesome with the Shift deck. Crypt Streaker sees a lot of play, and then we've got Blessing of Unicorns. It's okay. It's kind of an iffy one. Probably if I was going to play in the tournament tomorrow, I wouldn't play this. I feel like it's just too clunky to attempt, but Bright Moon Brave is decent, and yeah, I really like the diamond pool right now. I like it actually better than my blood pool. My blood pool has some decent removal, but yeah. So let's move on to our ruby pool and see what we've got there. So we've got 2 Woolvir Baa'sher, and this is making me want to play Ruby Diamond Shift right now, because that guy is an amazing turn 2 that your opponent has to answer very quickly, because 3 toughness is hard to get around, and then each time he attacks, he's going to get that +1 for each attacking troop this turn, and he just gets it. Like, he just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So it's like, it's just like what's it called? It's just like Rage, but it's better because it's for every attacking troop. Veteran Raider's a decent one to throw some things in play. Twisted Taunter is okay in like wild decks, but not the greatest. 1 Skewer is pretty good. A Staggering Blast is amazing to have as a nice finisher, where our opponent has tons of ground troops and we Staggering Blast and we just push all the damage. Flame Hand Invoker, we got 2 of those. Really amazing to have. A Lunge Swiss Strike is an okay removal card, is like maybe a one of. And Death Mask is an all-star. Like, if you want to play Shift and you have Death Mask, like, that is a card that you should really consider. You're like, wow, I really want to play Shift now because I got Death Mask. Next, we've got Ember Tears, and I've started to see people play this as a one of. It actually does a pretty good job of closing out games, and so I'm starting to reconsider actually playing it. Dealing that extra 1 point of damage every turn is pretty amazing, especially when we've got like 2 Ashwood Soloists, so we can like ramp right up into it. Seems pretty good, because a lot of times we can stall out a game pretty good, and Ember Tears, although it doesn't affect the board state at all, it's going to help us push through that extra damage we need. And then finally, we've got an Ashwood Blade Master, which is another great card to have. That, you know, it's got that Swift Strike, so when we push through damage with it, we can pump it during our opponent's end step. If nothing's happening, we can pump it and still like bluff with cards in our hand. I'm really liking the Shift, the Diamond Ruby Shift, and Diamond Ruby Shift is one you really have to look out for. The biggest issue when you play this deck is going to be like, once you've shifted all those abilities around, your opponent may be able to try to stop what you're doing by killing that troop in response. Moving on to the Sapphire, we've got Thunderfield Seer's okay, but you know, he's probably not going to do that much in here. Throwback is also an okay one that we can use to tempo our opponent pretty well. Enters play, look at target champion's hand. That's okay, I guess. Doesn't really do too much. Sapphire's not looking too good. Bright Moon Brave is probably one of our better ones already. As an additional cost to this, you can exhaust or ready to pre-control, exhaust up to 2 target troops that can't ready during their controller's next ready step. Yeah, I've never really liked Entangling Webs. Cyclone Shaman's okay. We've got 1 cripple, Arcane Focus. I'm really just not feeling the Sapphire pool right now. It would have been something maybe if I had like 2 of the cards where I could exhaust my opponent's stuff and it puts spiders in their deck every turn, that would be something, but I'm really just not feeling Sapphire. So I think we can easily rule this one out. We also, one of our rare cards is Syzygy, which kind of feels bad. When you play an action, yeah, that's not going to happen in the sealed pool. It's just not going to happen for us. It doesn't do anything to a board state. If you see cards like this that are just not troops and not removal, and they're just kind of like buffs to your deck, there's virtually no way that you can play these effectively in your deck. Or if you can, like, I don't know, it's not going to work enough times for you to make it to the finals, typically. But, you know, you never know. You might prove me wrong. Here's our wild pool. Looks pretty good. Got a Wrathwood Larch. Is one of my favorites. I love seeing this guy in my wild pool. He makes your whole wild deck much more consistent. On top of that, in the late game, he's still a 4/6 body, which is very relevant. Another amazing card, your Rotroot Enchanter. Gives you that Sky Guard that you need to take care of those flyers. You put him on the board, you can still attack with him. If he gets buffed by something like this Night Sky Stargazer, that's just ridiculous, because that's a 5/7 Skyguard steadfast troop. And then sometimes people will throw flying on him, so now he's Skyguard and he's actually flying, which is pretty awesome too. Having a steadfast flyer is always good. Let's see, Red Fur Ranger's okay. It gives things crush. It's just kind of a bear. Just kind of sits there and does some okay stuff. Dynamite's pretty good. Live Lyricist will help you get into some of that other stuff. Merry Minstrels is also pretty good. So I wouldn't fault anyone for playing Wild, but I would want to play it with like Sapphire or something. Or maybe, I mean, I guess like you could try to play it with Diamond. I'm not sure which champion we would use if we went Diamond, but I really feel like the deck these cards are telling us to play is I feel like the most powerful deck we have, and you really have to make a judgment call on this, is our Diamond Ruby pool. Let's also look at some of our Shardless cards, because we could also throw some of those in here. Let's see what we got in our artifact range. So we got our resource optimizing infusion device, which is okay. A Mecha Filcape, which I see some people play sometimes. It feels like it's okay. And then Root Forge Regalia is kind of a must, especially for a deck like ours. As a one-of, this is a great one-of in any deck, so that's a pretty easy choice. Alright, so we're definitely picking the Odo champion, I believe. Let's see, so let's come in here. Let's turn off Shardless. And let's go ahead and turn on champions. Let's say all types off, and then come down here and do champions and do PvP. That'll help. And we only have set 3 champions, so we're probably just going to run Odo. We could also, though, go with... Actually, you know what has been really good for me lately has been Bryson Maplewood. Bryson Maplewood, giving the Swift Strike to your dudes, it's pretty awesome when it happens. But yeah, either him or Odo, Nightbane Ovo, which is going to allow you to revert a troop you control. Not your opponents, just you. So either one of those. Let's go with Ovo with this one, and we'll see how much we have. And then, like, the big thing I look at with Bryson is I kind of want some token generation. Something where I can play a lot of dudes before my opponent does. I mean, maybe we've got that. Hold on, let's see. Bryson has been the man for me. I mean, I did do very well with him in last week's 5 Shards tournament, which was pretty happy. Made me pretty happy, at least. That Swift Strike definitely makes him a lot better than Palamedes from set 1. Makes him an all-star. Okay, so we've got Bryson Maplewood. Let's come back here. Let's turn off the champion. Basically, we'll turn on all types except for champion, so we don't need to look at those. PvP, and we'll do shards, ruby, or not wild, ruby and diamond, and shardless. So this one, you know, a lot of times what's nice is once you've figured out your deck, for the most part, it kind of builds itself, which is pretty nice. So we've got 2 of these Woolvir Baa'shers. I'm definitely playing both of those. I'm definitely playing this Veteran Raider because it's going to give me another troop, which is going to make Bryson Maplewood. So this is where we're getting our token from, so we can have more troops than our opponent, hopefully. Sunseer is going to give us Life Drain, which is reasonable, so as a one-of, that's fine. Deal 1 damage to each attacking troop. I mean, that could be a pretty good winner for us as well. Maybe not on that one. Staggering Blast, though, is a definite one we're going to play. Spirit-Bound Spy. Now, this card definitely makes me want to play Bryson, because we give him +2 or +1/+1 in Swift Strike. It becomes a Phantom, comes back into play. Now we've got a Flyer that's +1/+1 in Swift Strike, because just like everyone's pointed out, it does not revert itself when it turns into a Phantom. So anything you buff it with, it keeps. Next, we've got the Spirit Eagle, another great one. We've got 2 of these. We'll definitely play 2 of those. We've got the Skewer, great removal for our deck. We've only got 1 of those, though. We could play Shard Ward, maybe, but that's probably not going to be something we're going to need. The Root Forge Regalia is going to do a lot of work for us. Ghost Feather is also pretty good, so we can throw him in there. I've been turned on to Ember Tears lately, so I'm going to go ahead and throw that in there. Definitely want the 2 Invokers. Lunge is a pretty good one. We'll throw 1 of those in there for now. The biggest problem with Lunge is the same problem with a lot of buff type removal cards. It's like you have to have the troop in order for it to work. However, we have a mostly troop deck, so we should have the troops, hopefully, to make that work. We also have Deep Gaze Champion. When a power is shifted, +1/+1 everything, yeah, this is a bomb rare to have. If we did not play shift, I mean, like, we might need to have our heads checked or something. In fact, Bryson Maplewood might be the better one to play in the shift deck anyways, because often, like, yeah, you could play these and then, like, do the whole, like, move things around and shift things, but yeah, I don't think it's that big a deal. Crypt Shrieker is another amazing one. What we can do with this guy, let's see, what have I seen people do with him? Now, I've seen people throw Flying on him, but we'll probably throw the Ruby. I mean, I've seen people throw Minor Diamond of Life, so he gets the life drain. That's pretty good. It's just very versatile. Just remember that between matches, you can change the gems out on these guys so they can be more versatile and help you out with things. If you need to have more evasion, like typically I think I would go evasion on this guy, so I would probably play Ruby of Flames, where he can't be blocked except for by artifact troops or troops that share a shard with him. That's probably the Ruby. I'd probably go with that Ruby of Flames on this guy. Got about 9 minutes left in the episode to close this out, but it shouldn't take too long. Ashwood Soloist, of course, is going to help ramp us into some of these awesome cards. The early Bright Moon Brave is going to buff those awesome cards for us. The Blessing of the Unicorn is just so iffy, I just can't bring myself to play it. So if you're brave enough to do this, you know, kudos to you, but I don't see that happening for me. Let's look at how many cards we've got in the deck. We've got 25 cards. That's too many cards in our deck. So we have to, we've got so many good cards to pick from. We actually have to whittle it down to some number of cards that's going to be a little bit better for us. Let's go ahead and throw our shards in there so we know what we have. So let's go ahead and just throw, looks like we'll go with 8 ruby and then 9 diamond for now. Be nice if humans got like a tri-shard, although their fixing seems to be a little bit different. Let's see, so 8 plus 9 is 17. So actually, I only need to get rid of 2 cards in order to really make this work. So honestly, I like Lunge, but I feel like I want more bodies and stuff typically when I'm playing a deck like this, so I think that's one of the cards I want to get rid of here. So let's get rid of Lunge. Again, it's just a little bit clunky for us to play. It doesn't permanently buff our Spirit-Bound Spy or do cool stuff like that. Let's see, maybe Ashwood Soloist, but we do have a pretty decent like high end to our curve. What's our 5-drop? Our 5-drop is Ember Tears. I mean, I still feel like this is a pretty good card to have to finish out games with, so I want to keep it in. I like the Crypt Shrieker. Another thing you can do with Crypt Shrieker is you could gem it with the Major Diamond of Solidarity, where when you deal damage to your opponent, you get +1/+1 counters. So like maybe if you feel like you're playing against control, you could do that in games 2 and 3. But having that evasive troop is kind of a big deal. Yeah, wow, kind of having a hard time with this. What do we get rid of here? What do we get rid of? It's really kind of hard because we can do so many cool combo things. Like we can go Death Mass, put the Death Mass ability on Ashwood Blade Master, and then he can just keep pushing damage in, and our opponent can't block him. I mean, obviously there's an answer to everything in this game. We probably honestly get rid of one Ashwood Soloist. Oh, Ashwood Soloist is one of my favorites. I love this guy. He's a very techie kind of a thing. He gets in early damage and your opponent can't deal with it. Plus he's going to ramp you at the same time, which is pretty awesome. The problem is that there are a lot of times when he becomes a clunky card and you have to attack into your opponent so that way you can get that resource to play that extra card, and you end up giving him up as a troop. So that's the only deal with Ashwood Solo. So I think that's the right thing to do here. And with 17 shards, let's go ahead and do the count on the deck. We'll do the deck analysis and draw test. Looks like we got 15 diamond and 14 ruby. So we're splitting the difference on our shards. So that makes it really easy. With 17 shards, it means we need 9 ruby and 8 diamond. We can also look at some of the things we're going to be playing early in the game. So our 1 drops are somewhat in the diamond range, but also we've got the ruby drop. I really want to be able to drop Ashwood Soloists early. Our diamond cards that we will be playing early are like Bright Moon Brave, which is pretty good, but even later it's okay for us to play them a little bit later. Spirit-Bound Spy is kind of a big deal too, so maybe we do push it back the other way, because having a turn 1 Spirit-Bound Spy is kind of a big deal in this deck. So maybe we do push it back the other way to the diamond side of things, even though we have more ruby cards. So it's really kind of like your call. It's like, you know, let's look at some of the early game. I mean, we do have a lot of diamond in the early game and a lot of our rubies in the late game, so maybe we can flip it back to the 8 ruby and 9 diamond, and hopefully we'll be able to get there with that. Also look at some of these double thresholds, so it's like double diamond here, double rubies on ember tiers, but that's 5, so by that time we should have it. Double ruby on skewer, so that one might be a bit clunky for us to play because we do kind of need that early, and then double ruby on veteran raider. It's another one we look at that may end up being a little bit clunky, but I feel really good about the curve. I feel good about this deck. It's a $2 deck that could win it all tomorrow if you happen to draft this or happen to get this in your sealed pool and you've got your 10 tickets. I was lucky enough to have a good tournament this week where I actually 4-0'd in one of the rounds and got my 10 tickets early on Tuesday, I believe it was, when I did some stuff. But yeah, that was pretty much it. So that's it for this deck. So let's do the recap and then we'll do the giveaway. It looks like Sir Grum's like the only person in channel because he's the only one talking, but I don't know because I can't see all the people in channel. So tonight on Deck Build with the Squire, we talked about some pretty cool stuff. We did the YouTube winner. We talked about some news. We had our very first invitational qualifier champion in InfamousNeo. It couldn't have happened to a better person. So congratulate him. Hit him up on Twitter. You know, say thanks. He deserves a pat on the back. He's probably one of the hardest working streamers in Hex right now. You know, you have him, you have Sirius, and you have like Alucard and a lot of the other big names. If you aren't following him, make sure to get out there and follow those guys because they're doing a lot of good work. Let them know how you feel. And that is for the 100K tournament. And then we've got Jtatta. He built a pretty awesome fog combo, and he didn't even tell me about it because we haven't really been talking too much. Not that we're not on talking terms, it's just, you know, people get busy, their lives go different directions. But he built that pretty awesome fog deck, which I'll be posting on the YouTube version of this. So if you try it out, let me know what you think about it. Maybe some of the changes you made to it. Tell me, give me your best. You know what? Next week we'll do a fog deck challenge. So for a draft pack, build your best fog deck, post it here on, actually we'll do that until the end of the month. Fog deck challenge until the end of the month. Post your best fog deck for 6 packs of set 3 on this video. So fog decks challenge. You have to build something that's basically, you just have to use the champion that we had and something where you're going to shuffle cards back into the deck. You don't have to use fog if you don't want to, but something where it's using that champion, you're going to shuffle cards in the deck, and you know, something where it's going to really take advantage of that, shuffling those cards back into the deck. And then we did the sealed deck build, and I feel like I picked the best pool possible. Our second best shard was wild. It was kind of a difficult choice. I wouldn't have faulted anyone for going into wild, although I felt like diamond and ruby were just calling our names with this one. This ends up being a lot like of the time. The ruby diamond deck seems to be still very prevalent, and people have kind of migrated from using Ovo to using Bryson because Bryson just works so well with Spirit-Bound Spy and some other things. So that's pretty much it for the show tonight. So really appreciate you guys for stopping by. No guests tonight. As a reminder, I'm always looking for new guests or old guests to come back on the show. You're always welcome to come on the show, especially if you're doing some Hex content. I would love to promote you on the show. Until next time, this is Aaron Squire signing off, saying God bless your families. Try not to rage too much out there.